Thank you, Lynette, so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk about the Wind River Reservation project, implementing elementary CS in the curriculum with social studies and making it culturally relevant. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you, and if you can just give me a quick introduction of who you are and what you've done.
Thank you. Zan Sikandabe, Nanai Lynette St. Clair, Nasosuri Das Na Sadika, Nasiki Shanyuranyam Begin. So, hello, it's a good day here. My name is Lynette St. Clair. I am Eastern Shoshone, and I come to you from the Warm Valley, and that is here at the Wind River Indian Reservation.
Why are you excited about this NSF-funded project?
Well, I think this is a really great time and opportunity for our students to be able to be highlighted with the skills that they come with, especially from Indigenous communities. We have so much to share with the world, but also at the same time, right now what we're going through is such a huge change and transformation, for our communities across the globe. So this is just one way for us to be able to engage our students and to be able to engage our community and allow people to be able to share the knowledge that they have. And so I think right now our students are looking for opportunities to be able to, share and learn together through this technology.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And, I think I read somewhere in an interview that you did that you do believe that technology is the future and kind of the way to pave, the cultural embodiment into the curriculum and to kind of, keep the history and the culture and the language alive, right? So it's exciting to see what this curriculum could do with the community.
Yes.
And from the focus groups that was conducted back in February across the schools in the Wind River Reservation, we heard from the community members the preservation of language was a strength and a key value. Could you tell us a little bit more about this?
The community that I come from is predominantly Shoshone. However, I have had the opportunity to work in the wonderful community of Ethete and among my Northern Arapaho relatives. And so one of the strengths that I think that we find in ourselves, being from two tribal affiliations, is that we are able to share the same traditions and the same knowledge. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar in that we recognize the intrinsic value of where we come from and who we are. And so passing that knowledge on to our younger people and our younger generation is going to help us to pave the way for their futures, because knowing who you are and where you come from is really critical in order for our communities to thrive. And so I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to collaborate with our relatives down the road, because it's going to strengthen not only the schools from which we come, the school districts that we work in and we serve in, but also throughout the Wind River Reservation as a whole. And I think it really is a great opportunity to unify both tribes and to be able to go forward and really strengthen our sovereignty as two tribal nations.
And it gives students, I think, a cultural identity, right? And a sense of being and belonging to actually learn that, especially during the school day and when they're young. Because then certain things get lost along the way. Could you talk to me about the process of how you guys are preparing, or how are you working with the teachers to kind of get them started with the curriculum?
So we had the opportunity to gather in the initial focus group meeting, which happened earlier this spring, and talk to a lot of the educators, but also the stakeholders in our community. We have our tribal co-chair who was present at the meeting and part of the focus group. We had tribal elders who were present there, but also the educators in the educational community and parents, because it's really important to get their insight into how they would like to see us implement this and what they feel is needed within our school. And so taking that information and formulating our mission, I guess you could say, for this initiative was one of the processes that was, that we had taken. After that, we were able to come back together and discuss the strengths of our community and how we can build on those. And as far as integrating, the technology and the computer science standards to address the Indian Ed for All, we are one of the leading, I think, school districts in the state of Wyoming who has taken that initiative and really, jumped on the opportunity to expand not only our own students' knowledge about the Wind River Indian Reservation, but also people throughout the state of Wyoming. And so this is, that I think is one of the missions that we hold, true to is everything that we do. We try to do it in the spirit of educating everybody. So Indian education for all.
Growing up, that's something that you don't get to hear a lot about, right? About especially the untold story of America, right? That we all hear about and we come to learn as adults.
Exactly. And, this is really just, another way for us to build on, the strengths of our community, but also to help everybody understand, the true and accurate history of the state of Wyoming and really the Wind River tribes here. And so by being involved in this computer science standards for all, or computer science for all, it's a teaching moment for everybody. And it gives us the opportunity to expand other people's knowledge and be able to write our own narrative. And so I think that is really important. And that's really a perspective that I like to come from, is having our own students, our own tribal members, and our own community be able to write our own narratives and tell our own stories from our own perspectives. Because we know that, history has been skewed by a lot of, other perspectives that don't really come from the communities in which they're about.
I completely agree, and I understand, and I think now is the right time to have these, education standards change, and really drill it into our youth, who are basically our leaders of the future. To make that change and hopefully last.
Exactly, and and you hit the nail right on the head when you said our youth are our future. And as when I taught, that was one of the things that I really wanted to emphasize to to my students, was that you are our future. And I know you're probably tired of hearing me say this, but you are going to be our tribal leaders someday. Every one of you have an opportunity to make change, and you're here on this earth for a purpose. It's up to you to find that purpose and to build on it so that you can come back and you can help your people, you can help your family, you can help our reservation, and you can, continue to strengthen and protect our tribal lands, through being knowledgeable about where you come from and who you are. It strengthens our tribal sovereignty. And I think that's one of the other things that is really important, is teaching, all of these things, from the perspective of a Shoshone tribal member, because I speak for myself, but I also want to be able to be the messenger for the tribe, and to be able to, to help them to get their voice out, and to maintain that respect and sense of pride for our tribe.
That's a beautiful message, that you're portraying, and you are being that spokesperson. So it's lovely to hear. What do you want, I guess, the world to know about the Shoshone people?
There's so much, to know. And I think one of the things is that, we're a very unique tribal group in that we have relatives all over. And I say that because, we share the same language stock in the Uto-Aztecan language group. And so we have relatives in Oklahoma, the Comanche. We have relatives in Nevada, the Paiute. We have relatives across the mountain in Fort Hall, the Shobans. We share all of these similarities with all of our relatives, through our unique, distinct language, the dialects and everything within that. But the other thing is that, even as Indigenous people, we still relate to all other tribes. We're all one, is one of the things that I've always been told when I was growing up, is that we are one and we're all related. And that's something I think that as we go further into the future, that's the message that we need to continue to maintain and, promote, because I think we're stronger. Like I said, we're stronger together than we are apart.
there something you'd like to leave us with or tell the Native American Conference audience before we leave?
So I just would like to welcome everybody to the conference. And again, thank you for participating in this. It's been a long time coming, and it's a very good conference. I think every year it gets better. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, we've had to, go to this online, format. But tune in for, even bigger and better presentations next year, where we can get to see each other face to face and be able to network. This is a great networking opportunity for everybody. Now we have Jared, who's going to explain to you a little bit more about the curriculum.
Hey everyone, my name is Jared O'Leary, and I am the Director of Education and Research at Bowdon Professional Development. And on this project, we are providing the professional development and creating the curriculum units for the Wind River Reservation project. So what is the curriculum development process for this particular project? So first it began with taking a look at the Indian Education for All standards that were incorporated into the Wyoming Social Studies standards. Next, it was taking a look at how those potential standards can connect with the newly released Wyoming Computer Science standards and finding ways that the two can interact and kind of work well with each other in a holistic and interesting way. So after we went through that process, we kind of wrote out our grant proposal, got accepted, etc. And the next step of the actual curriculum development process was meeting with people on the reservation. So we met with 3 different focus groups, and we did a strengths-based assessment. And in that assessment, we were talking with various stakeholders like community members, teachers, parents, administrators, etc. And we're trying to get their perspectives to find out what their strengths are and what their perceived strengths are in the community. And that way I can go and take those and use those strengths in the curriculum to kind of help support the community even more through the units that I'm going to create. So the next step in the process was to review all of the feedback and review all of the commentary and the analyses of the strengths-based assessment, and then find a way to incorporate that into the curriculum. So an example of what that looked like. So a lot of the members of the tribes mentioned that they really valued language use, and they really valued storytelling and mentorships and whatnot with the various elders within the community, or even just like family members. So when we were engaging in a discussion as a group, we realized that the ELA standards, the English and Language Arts standards, would connect very nicely with those particular strengths. So I next went through all of the ELA standards for grades 3 through 5 and tried to find ways to pair them with the Indian Education for All standards and the new Wyoming Computer Science standards. And it turns out they work really well with each other. So the next step of the curriculum development process was to actually go through and review all of the resources that the different stakeholders at the strengths-based assessments recommended. So for example, many of the tribal members and community members recommended looking at the Wyoming PBS lesson plans and resources. So I went through all of those, watched a ton of documentaries, read a lot about the 2 different tribes, as well as other tribes outside of Wyoming, and just tried to further my understandings, because I'm not trying to present myself as an expert of Northern Arapaho, Eastern Shoshone, or the Wind River Reservation. So after reviewing all of those resources, I went and kind of created this rough sketch, or this rough outline of, here are the different kinds of projects that I could create that connect with ELA, social studies, and CS standards, and that connect with the different strengths that the community members recognized and verbalized in terms of like storytelling and using native languages and learning more about history and the culture, etc., and finding ways to integrate those into some potential projects. After I had that rough sketch of the unit, I then went and developed a bunch of example projects for them. Some of them had only 1 project example, others had multiple. And the goal was to try and incorporate all those strength-based assessments of things that the community members were asking for into those example projects. Now, those example projects then guide the lesson plans that I create, where I go through and I create all these resources that walk through step-by-step how to actually teach the core understandings of the project, like the computer science concepts and practices, the ELA and social studies standards, as well as some extensions and other things that allow kids and even adults to dive deeper into their learning. The next process that comes after creating those lesson plans is creating these visual walkthroughs or visual guides. The visual guides basically show step-by-step how to create something in the coding platform that we are using. After I've created those visual guides, I then go and create video walkthroughs where I actually walk through on the screen in the bottom right-hand corner, demonstrating how to use this platform and how to actually create a project. Now, in all these visual guides and lesson plans and videos, the goal is to make it so that kids and the teachers that are working with them create something that is individually meaningful. So the goal is not to replicate what I'm demonstrating in the videos and in the example projects. The goal is to actually get it so that kids create something that's interesting to them. So thinking of what aspects of your own culture or your understandings of history or your own interests can you incorporate into your project, so that way every single project in the class is different across the classroom. All right, so after the curriculum unit has been created, the goal is to begin the PSA cycle. So the PSA cycle is going to be this iterative process where throughout the school year, we are going to send out the resources. Community members will then have time to look at those resources, implement them into the classroom, and then they're going to provide feedback to say, hey, you could tweak this to make it more culturally relevant, or hey, have you thought about adding in this resource, or what if we change this, or blah, blah, blah. So there are many different things that are going to come out of this particular review cycle. After we receive the feedback, I will then go back to the lesson plans, which are essentially in draft form, and all the resources that I've created, and will then make those modifications based on the recommendations. Because again, I'm not trying to present myself as an expert of either the Northern Arapaho or Eastern Shoshone or the Wind River Reservation. So we want to make sure that we are engaging with various stakeholders in the community who can provide that expertise and make sure that everything is culturally relevant and is interesting to not only the kids, but also to the adults who are facilitating these projects. So throughout this entire process, the strengths-based assessment in particular has kind of guided everything that I have created and will continue to create and iterate on. In particular, when it comes to culturally relevant, in terms of how to make this kind of curriculum culturally relevant to the kids on the reservation, I also have to think of how to make it culturally relevant for everybody in Wyoming, and then also expanding beyond that to anywhere in the US. So a lot of the resources that I'm developing are taking that into account. And it has really kind of guided the development process in terms of I need to have very specific resources for the 3 districts that are on the reservation, while also taking into account that there are going to be many Wyoming educators who are not very familiar with the Northern Arapaho and Eastern Shoshone, and so provide resources for the teachers in Wyoming and then beyond. So for example, I live in Arizona, and so there might be some teachers in Arizona who would really like to learn more about, like, let's say, the Navajo tribe, and incorporate these lessons into it. So the lessons are designed from the beginning to be open in terms of, even though the examples are specific to Northern Arapaho and Eastern Shoshone tribes, the lesson plans themselves are culturally relevant for any type of culture, whether it is a tribal nation or not. So that is a very important part of this curriculum development process that has been guided by the strengths-based assessment. So I hope my explanations of the curriculum process and the strength-based assessment in particular have been useful for you. If you would like to ask me more questions or point me towards some resources that might help this overall process, you can contact me at Jared, J-A-R-E-D, at bootuppd.org. That's BOOTUP.org. And now that I've kind of rambled on about the curriculum process, I want to introduce the rest of the team who's going to talk more about this particular project.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joey Wilson, and I am the principal investigator for this particular project. I work for the American Institutes for Research, which is a nonprofit that is focused on education research, evaluation, and technical assistance. I'm based in San Francisco, but I primarily focus on computer science education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jill Bowdon, and I'm a senior researcher at American Institutes for Research. I'm also a co-principal investigator on this project.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Black. I'm with the Wyoming Department of Education. I'm the Social Studies, PE, and Health Consultant and the Native American Liaison for the department.
Hi, I'm Laurel Ballard with the Wyoming Department of Education as well. I work as the state lead for digital learning at the department.
Hi there, I'm Abby Funabiki. I'm the Associate Executive Director at the nonprofit Bowdon PD. We'll be providing the on-the-ground support for districts and teachers during this project.
Hi everyone, and I'm Karen Melara, and I will be moderating the session with everyone. So we'll go ahead and start off with Joey. Joey, what is the project all about and what are the goals?
Sure. So this is a really interesting project. It's focused on, at the elementary school level, integrating both Wyoming's new Indian Education for All standards and the new computer science education standards. And specifically what we're hoping to do is write, pilot, and refine 2 curricular units for upper elementary grades that integrate both of these sorts of standards. And this is specifically on the Wind River Reservation. So we're working with 3 separate school districts there. We are hoping to increase sort of teachers' confidence in teaching computer science and the Indian Education for All standards. And we want to make sure that they feel comfortable with bringing this really cool topic to their students. And so those are kind of the high level goals that we're focused on within this project.
The next question is really for either Laurel or Rob, so feel free to chime in, whoever wants to speak on it first. How did this partnership come about?
So this actually, back in 2018, the Wyoming legislature put into statute a requirement for our school districts to implement computer science education, K-12. And so one of the things they had us do is go out and visit all of our school districts to figure out what their concerns were, how they were thinking about it and approaching it. And we had a lot of concerns coming out, especially at the elementary level, thinking about how do you implement computer science when we didn't have new funding coming to our districts to be able to implement. We already have, especially at the elementary teacher, very, very full plates that make it difficult to think about that idea of how do I implement one more content standard that they've never done before. So we were talking through a lot of options and thinking through some of these pieces. And so part of what the districts and the department have been talking about is how you might be able to integrate computer science into other content areas. Because when you're when they leave school and they go and enter the workforce, the reality is that although they maybe need to know computer science, it's really in the context of other fields. So you might need it in the context of health services, or in engineering, or there's a lot of difference, right? Like art, and even we see it everywhere. And so really that idea of looking at it and how you might be able to integrate computer science into other content areas. The year before we had the computer science legislation go through, we also had the Indian Education for All legislation go through to support districts with, or asking districts to kind of teach the Indian Education for All as well. So when the grant opportunity came out, it really was like a nice opportunity for us to work together. We'd already been kind of trying to figure out the partnership between the AIR and Bowdon PD to figure out how we might be able to work together to provide some of the support and professional development that our educators need. And so it became a beautiful opportunity to really look at and provide examples for educators to be able to teach computer science integrated into another content area. And so a beautiful fit really is the Indian Education for All. And on top of that, we know that we have great disparities in computer science with underrepresented minorities, and that is definitely true with the Native American population as well. And so part of what we were hoping to do is to engage students when they're young, being into computer science and getting them excited about computer science in a way that really is culturally relevant for them.
Yeah, definitely. And Rob, do you have any second thoughts on the topic?
No, it's just the way it came together was it was sort of just a great opportunity, and like Laurel said, for us to work even more closely with with some of the schools on the reservation, and you know, it just kind of worked out great that the Indian Ed for All standards came out, and then a year later, computer science, and here we are, kind of marrying the two in this this exciting project.
Yes, definitely.
And I just wanted to add real quickly too. I think it's what makes this really exciting is the fact that computer science education is so new, and the partners that are a part of this are all kind of at the forefront of what this could look like in terms of how to implement computer science, how to implement Indian education for all. The school districts that are on the Wind River Reservation, they will be some of the first in the country to implement anything like this. And I think we recognize and we are excited that we are partners in this. Like, we do not view ourselves as the sole arbiters of the information. We are co-creating this this whole project with the school districts and community members that are on the Wind River Reservation.
Yeah, it's definitely such a diverse group, so it's really great to see what the outcome will be after the project is complete. Jill, could you explain to us what RPP is, and then what is the Network Improvement Community?
Yeah, so an RPP, that stands for Researcher Practitioner Partnership, and it is a model for doing research that instead of doing research on a community, we're doing research with a community. And so right from the very beginning, the idea is to build relationships with, in this case, with the educators, with the district administrators, the teachers who are working with students, to incorporate their priorities, their needs, and their strengths, and to use that as a foundation for the research. We have already been out on the Wind River Reservation a couple of times now, with the sole purpose of just listening to the voices in the Business Council and listening to the voices of teachers and parents and administrators out there, to learn more about their community strengths, the strengths of their students, and also what they prioritize in terms of learning about computer science. And so we're really using that information to spur the development of the curriculum that we're writing for computer science. As we go along in our Researcher Practitioner Partnership, we will continue to work with the community to gather information about both the professional development and the curriculum itself. Part of our goal is to make sure that we're developing culturally relevant materials that promote the strengths of the community and really promote the heritage and culture in a positive way of the tribes on the reservation. And so we will be checking in on a regular basis through our networked improvement community, where we'll bring stakeholders from the 3 different schools together, and we will ask different research questions. We'll survey the teachers, we'll do some observations in classrooms, we'll gather artifacts of students' work, all with the idea of kind of checking, are we on the right track? Is this working? Are we developing something that is aligned with the needs of the community? In addition, we will take that information that we're gathering about the curriculum and professional development and use it to feed an iterative improvement of those materials. So every time we gather information is actionable, and it will feed into revisions to the curriculum, revisions to the professional development, so that over time we're strengthening the curriculum and strengthening the professional development and really making it work for the people in those schools and in those communities. At the end, we want to have a computer science curriculum that really works, that is feasible for the teachers to do in a way that's meaningful for students. So that's our end goal, and our plan is to work together with the community to accomplish it.
Thank you. And then this question is for Rob. could you tell us more about the Wyoming's Indian Education for All social studies standards, and why were they incorporated in the 2018 revision of these standards?
You bet, Karen. 2017 is when the Wyoming legislature passed a bill that mandated that the State Board of Education review Wyoming's existing social studies standards. But it didn't just happen in 2017. This was an effort. It was really underway for, I think it's fair to say, decades. People both on and off the reservation had advocated for some sort of mention or language or standards in Wyoming's education standards that more fully address the history and the culture of Wyoming's Indian tribes. The two federally recognized tribes are the Northern Arapaho and the Eastern Shoshone, but we have a lot of other tribes represented throughout the state as we border Montana and Utah and Colorado and South Dakota, and we have a lot of influence from tribes in those nations as well. So it just kind of came together in 2017 really well. There was a lot of support in the legislature. The Fremont County delegation really supported it. Fremont County is where the Wind River Reservation lies, and it's shared by our two federally recognized tribes. And like I said, a lot of support from throughout the state. The legislation went through with very little opposition and was passed in February of 2017. Governor Meade, the governor at the time, signed it into law in March of 2017, and that set into motion the process where a committee of teachers, of community members, of tribal and non-tribal folks got together, business people, and looked at the social studies standards, reviewed, refined them, and more fully addressed what the legislation asked for, was addressing the history, the culture, and the contemporary contributions of the tribes, both in Wyoming and of the region. So that work ended in early 2018. The work of the committee, the recommendations were accepted by the State Board of Education and accepted by the governor, who had the final say, and Governor Meade adopted those into law in August of 2018. And what that meant was schools across Wyoming would have to put more of an emphasis on the history and the culture of Native people, the first people of Wyoming and of the region. And the state board, as it typically does, offers 3 years for school districts to implement the new standards. And the districts right now have to have them fully implemented by the 21-22 school year. So that's another year from now. So this project is a great way to help districts begin to implement those Indian Ed for All standards. Indian Ed for All is sort of a colloquial term, and it's used in other states, but essentially it's about the history and the culture of our native tribes. And this is a great way too. It's already been mentioned, but we're not only addressing the social studies standards, but incorporating the new computer science standards, and that is a movement that's happening more and more often, is the cross-disciplinary aspect of this. But that's kind of the short version of the long version of how these came into law. But it was very exciting at the time when the legislation was passed for the supporters of these kinds of standards, and they more fully mirror standards in a lot of other states that have tried to embrace the history of our First Nations.
Okay, perfect. That's a good segue for our next question to Laurel. Laurel, could you tell us a little bit more about the new Wyoming Computer Science Standards for All and how Wyoming is supporting computer science education?
Absolutely. So we actually created a committee that comes together and made of various stakeholders. So we have educators across all grade levels, and administrators, as well as this one actually had a significant amount of industry involved in the development of the standards, because certainly industry was a big player at the table as they wanted to see the computer science standards passed. So we put together a review committee that kind of looked at standards, and they pulled pretty heavily from the Computer Science Teachers Association standards. And so, I think as a lot of states have done, and they've taken it and then we Wyomingize it as other states have done their version of that. And so we did that. And then this past, earlier this year, I believe, or late last year, they completed the State Board of Education approved and the governor signed off on the content standards. So we have the content standards that are in place. And so we are working with districts in a lot of different capacities. We are working with districts in terms of thinking strategically about how you implement computer science. So we do work with them on visioning how computer science, how to think about computer science and how to incorporate it within their vision of education, so that it's not, here's our vision of education on the left and here's computer science on the right, and we have this extra thing to do now, that it really becomes part of the core of their vision of education, and then really developing action plans to put in place to kind of think about how to do this and roll this out over a set of, really the next few years. The content standards are required to be implemented K-12 in the 22-23 school year. So we are actively working on that. So we are working on finding professional development for teachers and finding new pathways for teachers to be able to both learn about the computer science standards and understand that, because certainly Wyoming is like all the other states where we do not have an overabundance of computer science teachers. And so we're trying to figure, and we really struggled with having especially when the standards were passed, having a pre-service pathway that was feasible for a lot of teachers, and didn't have a lot of teachers interested in that pathway. So we've been working on that and finding new ways to certify and endorse our teachers in computer science. So those have been the big pieces, really trying to help them to figure that out. We've done a lot of this so that what we found is that districts really are all solving kind of the same sets of problems, but they were really solving them in a way that was very siloed. So we're all going to try and do the same thing. We're all going to try and figure out how to do it, but they all solved, really on their own. And so as we've been doing some of the training and work, we've done a lot of work on coordinating our districts to be able to talk with each other and collaborate about what they're doing and the successes that they're seeing, and talk about the issues and the obstacles that they've run into. And what we're finding is that a lot of districts may have solved one, while they're facing one problem, another district is trying to solve that or successfully solved it. And they have really been able to feed off each other to be able to get the implementation in place. And it's been quite spectacular over the last year. Watching when the implementation started with like maybe 6 school districts across the state that had computer science, to a large chunk of them already offering computer science and making significant headway thinking about that K-12.
I just wanted to build off of what Laurel was saying with the standards. I think what's interesting about this project, especially in elementary school, is that we're trying not to think of computer science for this particular project as a standalone subject. We're viewing computer science as a tool to support social studies and English language arts and other subjects like that, because we know that teachers are tasked with they have to wear so many different hats. And so if we are able to incorporate the computer science aspect of it into something that teachers are already doing and allow them to learn something new, we think that is a really interesting approach that will allow more teachers to bring this cool stuff to their students.
Okay, thank you. And this question is for Jill. What do you hope to learn from the research from the Wind River Elementary Computer Science Project? And what research have you done already?
This project is funded through the National Science Foundation, and they have 2 main criteria that I think are worthy goals for the project. So one is to make a contribution to the state of knowledge about computer science education through the research. And the other is to have a broader impact on both the students that we're serving in this project, but also a broader impact on students in the state and in the nation. And so I think those are our 2 main goals for the project. we are working to contribute to the state of our knowledge about how to best serve students in elementary school. And as many of the folks on this call have already mentioned, it is really tough for elementary school teachers to figure out how and when to teach computer science. Many of them find it very interesting, but because they already have a full plate of trying to work with students on early literacy and math skills, and because many of them have never encountered any computer science education themselves in their teacher prep programs, it can be a very overwhelming task to all of a sudden learn that you're going to teach computer science in grades 3 through 5. And so part of what we're hoping to learn through this research is how to make it feasible and manageable and not so overwhelming for teachers. And we do think that one of the tricks is not to teach it as a standalone subject, but rather to integrate it into other content. And so, of course, in this instance, we're integrating it in with social studies to try to produce a culturally relevant and meaningful experience for the students on the reservation. We're also trying to have a broader impact through this project. And so, of course, we want all the students and the teachers that we're working with to have a really positive experience and to gain confidence in their ability to do computer science. But we also want to think about how to take the successes that we have on this project on the reservation and really funnel those into things that we can scale up at the state level in Wyoming and also nationally. So how can we know, for example, that all schools are going to be required to teach the Indian Education for All social studies standards. They're all going to be required to teach the computer science standards. How can we take the curriculum that we're developing and make it available to schools and districts across the state? Or similarly, how can we look at other states that may serve Native students and think about how to translate the materials and make them meaningful for the students and relevant for the students that they're working with. So I would say that those are the big goals that we have on this project. And we have begun the research. We went out in February to do some focus groups that were all about collecting information about strengths of the community. So really taking the time to do some deep listening to the stakeholders who are on the ground and who are living on the reservation, who are working on the reservation with students. And so we're going to use that data that we got through those strengths-based focus groups to inform the curriculum development and also to start establishing those relationships that will be the cornerstone of all the research that we do.
Thank you. Well, speaking about the curriculum, this question is for Abby. What will implementation for teachers and districts look like?
BOODUP will be supporting this project in two ways. One will be on the ground providing professional development on the integrated computer science lessons with teachers. We'll be able to support teachers by providing workshops throughout the year, as well as follow up those workshops with model teaching. The new teachers brand new to this subject can see what computer science teaching looks like with their actual students. And then also with coaching for the brand new teachers and working with the teachers to collaborate with each other as a cohort to bring computer science to their students. The other way we're supporting the program is through creating the curriculum in collaboration with the teachers. Our Director of Learning and Research, Jared O'Leary, will be writing the curriculum based on the strength-based assessments that Jill is talking about, as well as resources and conversations with the groups he's collaborating with to create the curriculum. We all understand that teachers are super busy, and so that's where this focus on integrating computer science with the new Indian Education for All standards came from. And so we hope to be able to create lesson plans and then provide the professional development on those lesson plans to make it as easy as possible for teachers to take on this brand new subject.
Sounds wonderful. And this question is for Rob or Laurel, so feel free to jump in. What statewide impact could you see this project having?
So there's a couple of things I'm really hoping. One is that we can find ways and give us information on how to engage students early in ways that are meaningful, so better understanding that. We also have found in some of our discussions that some of our other school districts outside of the reservation itself are actually kind of struggling with how to implement and teach the Indian Education for All standards. They really want to do a great job, but I'm not sure they fully understand those cultural pieces and things like that and their history well. And so I think that I'm hoping that this serves two purposes, right? And the fact that I want them to be able to understand how you can integrate computer science into other content areas, but it also, I'm hoping to give them something that, having been built and coordinated and collaborated with based on what we understand and learn from our partners on the Native tribes and schools districts that are on the reservation, and being able to take that then back and give them not only how do you help teach computer science, but giving them something that's really meaningful and like I said, I think we've said a couple times, culturally relevant for the tribes that are on the Wind River Reservation.
And I would just add that, just this partnership is exciting, and that hopefully we can learn some lessons on how our multiple entities can partner in the future, especially on the reservation. Maybe we can learn or develop a model for doing this, but also off the reservation, because like we've said multiple times, these are brand new computer standards, new Indian Ed for All standards, and there's going to be more standards come down the pike too, as every content area is reviewed. So it's nice to see this kind of partnership with teachers on the ground, with content experts, with state officials there to assist, and if we can create better resources and materials for teachers, and it trickles down to our students, especially our most vulnerable ones on the reservation, what a great success story this will be, So that's what excites me, is that as some of the other folks have alluded to, that we're developing maybe models or prototypes or something that can be replicated. And that's what we're always trying for, right? With grants, is that we can sustain it, when the grant money goes away, and there's excitement and passion and the ability to keep doing that.
I was going to add that I think one way that we are building in order to have that broader impact and scale is our focus on the interest-driven projects. So even down at the unit and lesson plan level, we're asking students to express their voice and choose what they're interested in learning. We hope that no project will look the same, and because of that learning, we think that throughout Wyoming, projects and the teaching will look different, and also maintain that cultural relevancy.
Any final thoughts?
We're just really excited. I know I'm really excited to continue to partner with everyone on the Wind River Reservation. We've been incredibly appreciative of the time and the space that everyone has given us, especially as outsiders. From last December through February, we had a really wonderful opportunity to meet with the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho business councils. We've been able to meet with community members. We've been able to really take a lot of time to listen, and we plan to continue to listen because I think, as Jill mentioned, and as everyone has said on here, that's a cornerstone of this project. We want this integration of computer science education and Indian Education for All standards to be authentic, and we want the teachers and students and family members that are using this and are their students are actually taking part in this, they feel excited by it and they feel a sense of ownership of this as well. And that to me is something that I'm looking for, and I'm hopeful that that everyone that's involved will also feel the same way.
Well, thank you everyone for joining in on this call and for discussing the Wind River Computer Science Project. And I hope everyone has a great time at this conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.